I'm Liz Faublis, and this is Currents. After an appeals court declines to rehear a case, what's next for Prop 8? Plus, a talk on the origins of the law of the land.
People recognize that there is a crisis in society, that we lack a common understanding of what the basis for our legal decisions should be.
And is it the Vatican's best kept secret? We'll find out what it is and hear more about it.
I don't necessarily think Catholic social teaching a big secret for the Vatican. The public probably does not know about it, and I think bringing some of the themes to light that Ellen did tonight was very helpful.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. A setback this week for supporters of traditional marriage in one state. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco decided on Wednesday to not re-examine a case involving California's Proposition 8. The measure affirms marriage in the state as between a man and a woman. It comes at the same time that supporters of traditional marriage in Maryland say they have enough signatures to get the issue put on the ballot in their state. Earlier this year, Maryland's governor signed into law a measure passed by that state's legislature to legalize same-sex marriage. Well, for more on this, I spoke earlier today with head of a group that advocates for traditional marriage across the country, Brian Brown. He's the president of the National Organization for Marriage. All right, Brian, we have a lot of ground to cover today. Now, in a nutshell, let's start with Prop 8. A smaller panel overturned Proposition 8, opening the door to allow for gay marriage. A court of appeals decided not to review that smaller panel's decision. So, 4 years of litigation on its way to the Supreme Court. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I want this to be resolved, and we want this to be resolved quickly at the U.S. Supreme Court. We're confident that the U.S. Supreme Court is not going to rule that somehow there is a constitutional right embedded with within the U.S. Constitution that somehow no court has been able to find, but this court found that equals marriage being redefined throughout the country, and the 50 million votes to protect marriage being thrown out essentially into a dustbin. I don't think that's going to happen, but it does show, the decision does show just how far our courts have gone in now making law and imposing their own will through activist judges rather than interpreting the law.
Right.
And I think that if you look at the dissent in the case, anyone that can read the dissent, please, you should read it, because it is scathing, but it is very accurate. The three dissenting justices basically say, look, you've short-circuited the democratic process, and the decision that you've just made bears no resemblance to the actual law. You're just imposing your own will. So I think that that's important, and I think that the dissent will be important actually when this gets to the U.S. Supreme Court, and I do believe this will go to the United States Supreme Court.
And Brian, you obviously do not mince words when it comes to this issue. You've called this a gross miscarriage of justice that we trust the majority of the U.S. Supreme Court will rectify. Now, how much of an impact do you think that the First Circuit Court of Appeals ruling overturning that 1996 Defense of Marriage Act, which in a sense saying that the federal ban on recognizing same-sex marriages violated the U.S. Constitution, how much of an effect do you think that will have on future cases like Prop 8?
Well, I think the important thing to understand here is that there's two different tracks that proponents of gay marriage are using in the courts to undermine marriage as the union of a man and a woman. And they're mutually exclusive. They're arguing two very different things. The one track I just spoke of was the Proposition 8 case, which seeks to create out of thin air a U.S. constitutional right to redefine marriage, and essentially, if the court found on these, U.S. Supreme Court found on these grounds, would overturn all of the state marriage amendments. So it's essentially the federal government redefining marriage. That's one track. And then there's the track that you just brought up. There are a number of DOMA cases that attempt to overturn DOMA. And the part that these cases, not all of them, but the one you just referred to in the First Circuit up in Boston, is is that the federal government somehow has an obligation to recognize same-sex marriages in Massachusetts or in any of the states under the jurisdiction of the First District Court. Mm-hmm. The argument being made there is essentially that the states have the right to define marriage, and then their decision forces the federal government to recognize it. It's much more of a state's false but states' rights argument saying the federal government doesn't have a right to define marriage. So I don't think this will be lost on the United States Supreme Court, that you have totally contradictory arguments being made by supporters of same-sex marriage. One argument being made in Perry is that the federal government must redefine marriage. The argument being made in the DOMA cases is that the federal government should stay out of it and the state should decide. And I think what's going to happen is that both of these tracks are going to end up most likely at the Supreme Court at the same time.
And Brian, in the time we have left, I want to take you down to Maryland, where marriage supporters have gathered over 100,000 signatures in a marriage petition drive, and that's an effort to secure a referendum on the state's new gay marriage law. Now, the executive director of the Maryland Marriage Alliance saying that recent endorsements of gay marriage by President Barack Obama and the NAACP helped energize their crowd. It got people off the fence. What are your thoughts on this Maryland effort, and what are you doing to engage people and kind of get them off the fence with regard to these issues?
Well, I'm honored. I serve on the executive committee for the Maryland Marriage Alliance, and I've been really honored to play a part and be involved in this with Derek McCoy and others on the ground. They're now at over 120,000 signatures, so they've more than doubled the signatures necessary. And I think what you just said is exactly correct. The fact that President Obama has come out in support of same-sex marriage has energized a lot of people to come out and say, this is the time we've got to make our stand. Let's have our churches collect signatures. Let's donate. Let's get involved. And I believe that's going to continue through to the election.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. We certainly did cover a lot of ground today, and I really do appreciate your time, and I'm sure we're going to have you back to cover more of these cases. But thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Well, we have more currents ahead with the rest of the day's headlines after the break. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faublas. The VatiLeaks saga continues, and it's up to a Vatican judge to decide if the butler really did it. With his lawyers by his side, Paolo Gabrielli, Pope Benedict's former butler, appeared for a hearing with the Vatican investigating judge Piero Antonio Bonet and the Vatican prosecutor. Gabrielli is facing up to 8 years in jail for aggravated theft. He's accused of stealing confidential documents from the Pope's desk. Additional charges, such as revealing state secrets, may carry maximum sentences of up to 5 years. Judge Bonet will decide whether Gabrielli will stand trial or be acquitted. Now, Paolo Papanti Pelletier, a law professor at a university in Rome and a Vatican court judge, said yesterday that people who are sentenced to imprisonment in the Vatican city-state are routinely sent to an Italian jail since the Vatican doesn't have its own jail system. He added, in Italy, prison sentences are much harsher. Pope Benedict has the power to pardon Gabrielli anytime. However, Pelletier expects he will wait for the trial to be over before deciding how or if to intervene. The World Meeting of Families in Milan closed with Pope Benedict celebrating a mass attended by nearly 1 million people. Well, today, in front of thousands more gathered in St. Peter's Square, the Pope recalled highlights of the triennial event. Rome Reports has that story.
Dear brothers and sisters, the past weekend I traveled to Milan for the seventh World Meeting of Families, devoted to the theme of family, work and celebration. This joyful international gathering was an inspiring witness to the rich and varied identity of the family as a communion of love based on marriage, a sanctuary of life, a domestic church, and the primary cell of society. It is in the family that we discover our God-given vocation to love, to enter into a relationship with others, and to live together in harmony. The dialogue which took place at the Feast of Testimonies provided an opportunity to reflect on some of the pressing challenges experienced by families today including the difficulty of finding time to be together, even on the Lord's Day. At the closing Mass, I encouraged our church communities to become even more like families, celebrating the divine love which alone can transform our world. May the meeting advance the gospel of the family and draw attention to the importance of families for the future of our societies. I offer cordial welcome to the Felician sisters assembled for the general chapter and offer my prayerful good wishes for their deliberations. I thank the choirs for the praise of God in song, upon all singing-speaking visitors, including those from England, Ireland, Sweden, Zimbabwe, Australia, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and the United States of America, and for God's blessings of joy and peace.
And separately, the Pope fondly acknowledged another celebration, a milestone which took place in the UK. Benedict offered his warmest congratulations and a heartfelt prayer to Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, who is celebrating her Diamond Jubilee. It has been 60 years since the Queen became monarch, during which time the Pope writes, "You have offered to your subjects and to the whole world an inspiring example of dedication to duty and a commitment to maintaining the principles of freedom, justice, and democracy in keeping with the noble vision of the role of a Christian monarch," end quote. Benedict recounted his visit to Holyrood House in Edinburgh at the beginning of his apostolic visit to the United Kingdom in September 2010, renewing his thanks for the gracious welcome and hospitality he received throughout those 4 days. Meantime, Vincent Nichols, the Archbishop of Westminster, celebrated a special Mass in London's Westminster Cathedral yesterday for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. In his homily, he spoke of how, quote, "the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II was the first thing I ever saw on television in our neighbor's house, yet the moment is still vivid in my mind." The Archbishop pointed towards the Queen's stillness and serenity during decades of domestic, social, educational, international, economic, and political change, and highlighted Her Majesty's Christian commitment and service. And the pomp and circumstance, pageantry, and tradition surrounding the Queen's Diamond Jubilee came to an end earlier today with a closing celebration that was fit for a queen. CNN's Elizabeth Corridon has more on that.
In a dramatic finale to 4 days of festivities, Queen Elizabeth II waved to thousands of cheering subjects from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. She stood with the royal family as vintage World War II aircraft flew overhead, and the Royal Air Force's Red Arrows team shot trails of red, white, and blue smoke. In a televised message Tuesday, the Queen thanked everyone who had a hand in the Jubilee celebration.
It has touched me deeply to see so many thousands of families, neighbors, and friends celebrating together in such a happy atmosphere.
Earlier in the day, she attended a service of Thanksgiving at St. Paul's Cathedral and led a procession back to the palace. Her husband, Prince Philip, missed the festivities. He's been hospitalized with a bladder infection and is expected to remain under observation for several days. The Queen instead shared a carriage with Prince Charles and his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall. Thousands lined the route, hoping for a glimpse of the 86-year-old monarch.
Oh, she's a symbol, isn't she? She's what makes our country great.
She's worked hard all her life for everybody. She didn't choose to do this, but she's done a great job.
The Queen called the 4-day celebration, which included a 7-mile flotilla and a rock concert for thousands, a humbling experience.
I hope that memories of all this year's happy events will brighten our lives for many years to come.
And that report from Elizabeth Corridon. Here in the U.S., the pro-life group Live Action has released another video showing a worker at a National Abortion Federation clinic advising a patient on a so-called sex selection abortion. The release comes less than a week after Congress voted down a measure to ban abortions based on the gender of the child. Now, unlike the previous 2 tapes released by Live Action from Planned Parenthood clinics, the latest tape shows a National Abortion Federation clinic worker advising a woman posing as a patient in a state where sex selection abortion is illegal.
Actually, I'm trying to get pregnant.
Okay.
I just want to terminate this pregnancy because of the gender.
Like I said, because don't tell us that. We don't want to know, because one of the things on here says,
Oh, I didn't see the word.
yeah, it says that you are not doing this because of race or sex.
Oh. Oh, I initialed everything without reading.
No, that's fine. That's better because.
Okay.
There's a.
So I just shouldn't say that anymore.
Yeah, don't say that.
Wait, why?
Because state law says we cannot do a termination on somebody just because of race and gender.
Now, we contacted the National Abortion Federation for a statement, but were unable to get a response. Last week, Live Action released two similar videos from Planned Parenthood clinics in Texas and New York City. It came the same week that majority of Congress voted for a measure that would have banned abortions based on the gender of the baby. However, the Prenatal Non-Discrimination Act failed to pass as it needed a 2/3 majority of the House to support it. Meanwhile, unborn children were big winners in last night's vote in Wisconsin to not recall Governor Scott Walker. Wisconsin Right to Life says Walker has done more to build a culture of life in Wisconsin than any other single public servant in the state's history. The organization also praised Lieutenant Governor Clefish, who also survived a recall vote. The effort to recall the two came after Walker's advocacy for a measure he signed into law last year that limited the collective bargaining rights of state workers. Well, the bills are certainly adding up for the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. According to AP, the Philadelphia Archdiocese has spent $11.6 million in legal fees the last 2 fiscal years. Now, the vast majority of that amount, $10 million, was spent in just the first 9 months of the current fiscal year. Doesn't include costs related to the trial of the former Secretary of Clergy for the Archdiocese, who was on trial accused of giving new assignments to priests who were known abusers. Speaking at an unrelated news conference, Philadelphia Archbishop Charles Chaput said, quote, "It's a great sadness that people were hurt and that the costs have been so great for the people of the Archdiocese." And one of the church's biggest events of the year is taking place next week. The International Eucharistic Congress gets underway in Dublin on Sunday. Cardinal Mark Willett, who is the Pope's messenger for the event, says he hopes it will strengthen the church in Ireland. Brooklyn Auxiliary Bishop Frank Caggiano is among the scheduled speakers at the International Eucharistic Congress. Stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. Coming up, a look at where our laws originate and where they're headed.
Don't steal, don't kill, don't lie, don't commit adultery, and so forth, are decisively, it seems to me, the work of reason.
Laws over abortion and same-sex marriage have taken up a fair share of the headlines recently, whether it's the measure to ban abortion based on the baby's gender or court decisions over the legality of amendments affirming marriage as between a man and a woman. People on both sides of the issue have made their voices heard in the public square. But where do we get our laws? Or perhaps more appropriately, where do they originate? With the government? Is it up to each individual? Or should we be looking to a higher power? The Crossroads Cultural Center, which was established by members of the Catholic movement Communion and Liberation, recently hosted a discussion on that at New York University, where a couple of experts weighed in.
Why do people obey the rules of law? Why do we obey at all? There is something prior to law. There is something that law has to respect.
One of the reasons so many people were here, I think they're intrigued by the idea of natural law. People recognize that there is a crisis in society, that we lack a common understanding of what the basis for our legal decisions should be.
Don't steal, don't kill, don't lie, don't commit adultery, and so forth, or don't hit your sister, are decisively, it seems to me, the work of reason.
Whether you believe in God or not, you can accept the reality that we are free, rational, and social beings, and having that nature, we are capable of understanding what is required of us in our relationship with others.
As a believing Christian, I also believe that these matters of natural law are also in line with the will of God and the law of God. And Revelation supports and illuminates a principle like the radical equality and the fundamental dignity of the human being.
Professor Robert George is one of the leading experts on natural law, a law professor at Princeton. Professor Simoncini is from the University of Florence and a visiting professor at Notre Dame. And he brings to the issue a very deep understanding of the history of law in Western civilization in the U.S. and in Europe.
We are losing our rooting of the legal system within our human experience. And so we are creating some way, something that is artificial, through the law. So we have to come back to a more realistic approach to this field.
I think that the two perspectives were very, very different. I think one was speaking sort of as a lawyer or a moral theorist, and the other was speaking really about sort of what humanity's experience has to add. And so I definitely got two completely new perspectives and a lot of food for thought.
I agree with the late Pope John Paul II, who in his encyclical Faith and Reason began with the following sentence: "Faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit ascends to contemplation of the truth." Faith and reason with respect to basic human dignity, natural rights, the fundamental right to life, come together to support these principles of morality, which should also be made principles of our law.
And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. When we return, getting back to basics on the teachings of the Church.
I see Catholic social teaching as being a bit broader as a topic, and it also forces a type of critical thinking.
Finally tonight, amid all the latest reports about the so-called Vatican scandal, its cover-ups, and the now unprecedented investigation of people who were at one time Pope Benedict's most trusted confidants, Catholics may find themselves wondering if they are being well informed about everything that's happening, not only at the Vatican, but also in the Catholic Church. Most people would agree they prefer to be kept in the loop about information that can have an impact on their lives. Well, Ellen Radigan, Associate Director for Pastoral Planning for the Office of Faith Formation, suggests rather than looking at all the challenges and interpreting what we think we are not being told, we should change the lens through which we view our church and focus on its actual truths and its teachings. That was the subject of a Theology on Tap. Ellen explored Catholic social teaching in a discussion called The Vatican's Best Kept Secret.
You know, we call it the Church's best kept secret. Why is it a secret? And I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I think that this is now my personal take on this. People want to talk about, when it comes to church, want to talk about the hot button issues, want to talk about, first thing, scandals. You want to talk about that, you want to debate the pros and cons of certain things.
Because our Catholic Church is always in the media, always in the news with different current events and hot topic issues that are going on, and I think it's important that we speak to some young adults about what the Church has to say on these issues.
Catholic social teaching is a great thing for society. I mean, first of all, because of the fact that the Church is supposed to be a witness, and so it's a really great witness for us in the modern world, especially with a lot of the contemporary issues that are going on around the world, things like poverty and war, and the sense of justice that the Church needs to bring to the world.
There are some things that are truth, and there are others that are interpreted, and I think we're constantly taking the truth and the reality of the Catholic tradition and reading the signs of the times.
Ellen is very pro getting the message of Catholic social teaching out there, and I think she's aware that she has the forum tonight to kind of spread the word of the Church.
I see Catholic social teaching as being a bit broader as a topic, and it also forces a type of critical thinking, forces you to step back from what's comfortable, from what you know, and to look at some of the bigger issues involved in being Catholic, but also in being Catholic in modern society.
You know, I don't necessarily think Catholic social teaching is necessarily a big secret for the Vatican. I feel like I've been familiarized with it because of some of my background. I think a lot of the public probably does not know about it, and I think bringing some of the themes to light that Ellen did tonight was very helpful because I think a lot of it could be very difficult to comprehend.
The person of human dignity, and then how we extend that into the community, and how the Church views those two issues, and everything else flows from that.
I don't think Catholics get as much credit as we should get for all of our Catholic social justice works, and I think that we do a lot. I think we're very active in our community, especially on the national level, and I know that on the local level, a lot of needy people get what they need from our Catholic parishes. I hope people take away a better understanding of what the church means with social justice and its social teachings, and will be able to live them out and act them out in their parish lives.
I think the Catholic social teaching is an integral part of life, and that everybody should be able to use Catholic social teaching on a daily basis in their own personal lives.
You know, I used the term, best kept secret almost as a joke. People are doing such good work. And we know that Catholic Charities is one of the largest service providers around. When I say secret, I think I mean the underlying general themes of justice and looking at especially issues of poverty and social concerns.
And some food for thought at a Theology on Tap. That is all for tonight. Be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. You can also connect with us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for watching. Now, on the occasion of Queen Elizabeth's Diamond Jubilee, we leave you tonight with footage courtesy of Rome Reports of Pope Benedict with the Queen during the Holy Father's 2010 visit to the United Kingdom. Enjoy. Have a good night.